Who has had the worst offseason in the SEC? Tennessee obviously generated a lot of coverage for how things went in the offseason for them this past year. Did they have the worst offseason in the SEC? That'll be Hot or Cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air, 50 years in East Tennessee. Integrity matters, cityheatandair.com. We're going to go down the list of SEC teams and discuss whether or not they had a good or a bad offseason based on what they needed to do and what their goals were. Now, this isn't just a ranking of bad or good. This is just did you achieve the goals you wanted? So we're going to start with Alabama. Did Alabama have the offseason they wanted in the SEC? I'm going to say yes. Now, Alabama didn't add much, but they didn't lose much either, okay? And Ryan Grubb coming in to become Alabama's offensive coordinator after spending a year in Seattle is huge. Ryan Grubb was there in Washington when DeBoer had all of his best success. Bringing him in is a huge year. Now, I know 23 scholarship players transferred out of the program, and it looked like Alabama was collapsing. They have the offense they need. They have the quarterback situation they need, and they have a lot of starters back. I think the offseason went exactly how they wanted. They kept their key guys for the most part. So I'm going to say hot. I'm hot on Alabama. They got who they wanted, and they did what they needed to do in the offseason. I wouldn't worry about them that much. Arkansas. This is so up in the air, but I'm cold. I'm cold. Losing Madden Imaliava to UCLA was a really, really, really big L. And honestly, Arkansas lost more than almost anybody. They lost Patrick Kudus. They lost Addison Nichols, who was once at Tennessee and actually played well for them last year. Isaiah Sategna, Luke Haas. Okay, they lost way too much talent in the offseason. They had a bad offseason. So I'm cold on Arkansas's offseason. Auburn. Hugh Freeze is desperate. I'm hot on Auburn. They had a good offseason. Will it translate to wins on the field? I don't know. It looks more like desperation than anything else, but they did add Jackson Arnold, who I think still has a lot of talent. I think last year he was stuck in a bad system with Seth Littrell at Oklahoma and Brent Venables. That program there is going south. I think that having Jackson Arnold is going to be a big deal, and Hugh Freeze loaded up with talent everywhere. So Auburn, I'm hot on. Had a good all season. Florida. Guys, I'm really hot on Florida. They returned everybody that was key. The portal movement wasn't heavy, but here's Josh Pate said something about Florida recently that's kind of sticking with me, what they've been doing with Billy Napier. That's anti what every other college football program does. And I still have questions about Billy Napier, the coach. However, college football is surrounded with teams going 65, 70, 75, 80 miles an hour on the highway to try to get to where they're trying to go. And most of the time they crash out. Florida has been staying at 45 miles an hour with Billy Napier for 3 to 4 years, getting to their destination. They didn't move much in the portal. The key for them was to keep who they had. And they did it after a strong finish to the 2024 season and DJ Lagway coming back. And I think that focus with more experience. Yeah, no, I'm hot. I think they had a really good all season. I think they had a great one, actually. So Florida, I'm going to say is yes, I'm hot on. Great all season. Georgia, bad all season. They lost the quarterback. They lost Carson Beck. I know you could say that they'll be fine. They're loaded elsewhere, and they probably are, but they lost Carson Beck. They had a couple more arrests because people can't stop drag racing, or people can't stop racing there. Okay. And Gunnar Stockton didn't look like he could fully replace Carson Beck in the college football playoff. And so they also, by the way, lost Jaden Rashada, who I think hit the portal again, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he has. So Georgia had a bad all season. Sorry, they did. Cold on Georgia. Kentucky. Ooh, Kentucky. They had a really bad year last year with Mark Stoops. They can't cash in on the easy bottom of the SEC East anymore with the no divisions. But they do have 4 experienced starters added on the offensive line. They have defensive line talent. They didn't lose that much to the portal. Yes, they lost Dane Key, a key receiver, and Barian Brown, but quite honestly, I don't think those were big losses, and I think they're able to add a little more raw talent elsewhere, and truth be told, they at least upgraded in the trenches, which was the most important thing. They upgraded at the areas that Stoops wants to upgrade because Mark Stoops wants to run that defense first program. I'm going to say hot, but maybe not as hot as they needed it to be to return to a bowl game. However, I think Kentucky could end up being better than many other people think. So I'm going to say hot slightly on Kentucky. If they weren't so bad last year, I'd say easy hot, but because of all their needs, I might say slightly hot. LSU, extremely hot on. Extremely hot. Brian Kelly and LSU had a much, much, much better all season than anybody. I think LSU and Brian Kelly should expect to try to win a national title this year, but at the same time, it could be out of desperation too, because I'm going to talk a little bit about all the different pickups, because also high on the list, who am I hot on? Oklahoma. They had a John Mateer, they had Jaden Knott, they had a Kendall Daniels. They, Brent Venables hired Ben Arbuckle, who brought Mateer with him from Washington State. Arbuckle obviously developed Cam Ward. They are loaded with talent that they've added because Brent Venables is trying to avoid falling onto the hot seat this year. So I'm hot on them, but I got to say something real quick. I have said I'm hot on LSU, Oklahoma, and Auburn. For the record, Bill Connolly ranked those as having the three best off seasons in the SEC. What do those three all have in common? The schools and fan bases are very disappointed and fed up with the coaches of those programs right now. LSU thought that they were building a dynasty, that they were getting a dynasty in Brian Kelly because he was the first coach with brain cells they had hired since Nick Saban. And they had won 2 national titles with coaches who had no brain cells. Auburn thought they were getting a brilliant offensive mind in Hugh Freeze. Neither has worked out to where they wanted to. LSU has had success with Kelly, but nowhere near what they expected, and Auburn has been a disaster with Hugh Freeze. Oklahoma, meanwhile, with Brent Venables, that was a hopeful hire that really hasn't worked out. All 3 of those programs are desperate. When you're desperate, you make bigger moves and go for bigger splashes in the offseason. So I do have to point that out. All right, so moving on. Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin last year went all in on the portal to try to build a winning team. Was he able to do it again? Truth be told, no. Lane Kiffin, if you're going to go all in on the portal the way he has, you got to pick up huge stars. They didn't pick up huge stars the way Lane Kiffin wanted to, particularly with Jackson Dart gone. So I know they have their quarterback, but they also lost Walter Nolan. They didn't just lose Jackson Dart. They also lost Walter Nolan and Trey Harris. And they didn't add any splash players to compete with them. Okay, so, Harrison Wallace, Dukes Alexander, Caleb Odom, Caden Lee is back. But those 3, and then Luke Haas and Damian Taylor, solid experienced guys, but not what Ole Miss needs. I think they're going to have a drop-off from last year. Mississippi State. We can talk some desperation here because Jeff Lebby had a horrible first year. I thought he was going to make more of a splash than he did, and they went 2-10. Jeff Lebby kept everybody back. He's not changing. He's not deviating from his plan, but I have to say I'm cold on their all season. They didn't have a good all season. They didn't fill all the holes that they needed to. I think Jeff Lebby is a little too committed to just building his program and keeping his guys in-house. And I think he needed to upgrade, specifically going outside of the family, and he didn't do that. So I'm cold on Mississippi State and the talent upgrade they did. Now, Missouri, I'm hot on them. I know they lost a lot of guys, most notably Brady Cook and Luther Burden, and I think Eli Drinkwitz is a goofball, and I'm not sure they'll be as good this year. But in terms of what they needed to do, well, they still have some stability, and most importantly, they kept Kirby Moore, their offensive coordinator, who really has been the success behind everything they've been doing recently. So taking that into account, I'm actually very hot on Mississippi State and what they are doing, because Kirby Moore has really been behind most of their success and their turnaround under Eli Drinkwitz, and keeping him when he could have gotten a head coaching offer somewhere else is a huge deal. That alone makes them having a good all season and makes them worth being hot on. South Carolina, I'm cold on them. Now, obviously Lenora Sellers coming back is huge, but there's other losses that they had that just aren't going to work. They lost Dowell Loggins to Appalachian State, the offensive coordinator. I wasn't that high on, but he proved me wrong, and I'll take the L. He proved me wrong. I hated him when he was with the Titans. He also mishandled the Cleveland Browns Johnny Manziel situation. Maybe not his fault, but losing him is big. Mike Shula being promoted to head coach, not a bad hire, or offensive coordinator, not a bad promotion. The former Alabama head coach, Mike Shula, remember, did help Carolina get to the Super Bowl with Cam Newton. He'll know how to coach Lenora Sellers. But still, the stability with Dowell Loggins is a big deal. But most importantly, they lost a ton of talent on defense, and Shane Beamer didn't replace the talent he needed to on defense. So I don't think they're going to be in the college football playoff hunt next year. I'm going to save Tennessee for last, but I'm going to jump to Texas in terms of that offseason. Well, I'm really hot on Texas. Both coordinators are back. All three of their coordinators are back. Yes, he lost a safety, but he's added some talent. He added Murad Wilson, Jack Andrews, Emmett Mosley V. Arch Manning is now ready to start. Quentin Ewers just choosing to go to the NFL early is why this is a win. He doesn't have to split his team by benching Ewers and going with Arch Manning, because Arch Manning is the better quarterback, and it's time to go with him. Texas, I'm hot. They had a good offseason. Texas A&M. We know Mike Elko went 8-5 his first year. I'm a huge believer in Texas A&M long term because they actually have an Ivy League head coach. You guys know my feeling on college football coaches. I think most of them are not smart. And I think with most of them not being smart, a coach with brain cells can sometimes be light years ahead of them. Go back and think about what Steve Spurrier was able to do in the 90s to the rest of the SEC. I think that keeping the continuity on the staff was a big deal. I do think they had some key losses excuse me, on the defensive line, but man, they added some playmakers, and that's what they needed. And Kevin Concepcion, Tennessee fans will remember him. He was at NC State last year. Getting him was a huge deal. And mostly just keeping things together. Unlike Jeff Lebby at Mississippi State, I think for Texas A&M, the need was more just about stability and continuity and developing together as a team. They have the talent, so the fact that they didn't lose a ton is a big deal, and I think that's going to help. Moving on, Vanderbilt. I'm hot on them because they got Diego Pavia back. Diego Pavia winning that eligibility lawsuit is enough to be hot on Vanderbilt, because Diego Pavia, that dude can play. That alone is why you should be hot on Vanderbilt. Going to talk Tennessee next. First, hot or cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. 50 years in East Tennessee. Integrity matters. cityheatandair.com.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Did Tennessee have a good or bad all season? They had a bad all season. Sorry, guys. I'm going to stick with this. I've told you guys, I think the Joey Aguilar move was a good pickup. He will be better than Nico Iamaleava was last year. He will not be better than Nico Iamaleava would have been this year. I think that was not a good all season for Tennessee with that in mind. So I think that because of that, no, Tennessee had a bad all season. Now I'm going to set up the poll question. Which SEC team had a worse offseason than Tennessee? Because there are 5 SEC teams that had a worse offseason than Tennessee, or that I said had a bad offseason that I'm cold on. Arkansas, Georgia, Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Tennessee. So I'm going to say Arkansas, Georgia, Mississippi State, and South Carolina. Which SEC team had a worse offseason than Tennessee? Arkansas, Georgia, Mississippi State, and South Carolina. Of the 4, I'm going to say South Carolina, and here's why. Georgia still has enough talent to compete for the college football playoff, which is the goal. Arkansas and Mississippi State both didn't expect to make the playoffs, so the hill is not that high to climb. South Carolina was on the cusp of the playoff last year. Their goal was to make it this year with Lenora Sellers. They didn't do what they needed to do in the offseason to do it. So I think South Carolina had, I have to say that I think South Carolina had a worse offseason than Tennessee. I think South Carolina may have had the worst offseason period, and that's not a good sign.